Yo, dear listeners and viewers, hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today I bring you another brand new guest, Winnie Yip, and we're going to delve into her research into disordered eating behaviors among bodybuilders and powerlifters, and practical applications for clients and coaches alike. So there's going to be a little bit of something for everyone, I'm sure. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, Winnie, I always ask my brand new guests this question: who are you? What do you do? And why are you so awesome at it?
I am a full-time coach. I would consider myself a not full-time athlete, but I am a bodybuilder. So I pride myself in coaching. Prior to coaching, I am actually a lawyer. And then I stopped legal practice to pursue my full-time as a coach. And only recently we kind of I was a master's student in law, and because I'm in law, so I thought like, you know what, in order to do better in my job, I need to, pursue another studies in what I'm doing. So then I took on a master's in strength and conditioning recently and just graduated. And that's my research on disordered eating behavior because one, I am a bodybuilder, which it does hit me hard on these kind of topics. And I realize that it doesn't just apply for bodybuilders. You will start to see a lot of times it applies really strongly to general population as well. So then it intrigues a lot of the interest because clients come to me about how they're so obsessed with food, how they feel like they find it very hard to balance between eating properly versus what I actually should be doing, and also why am I feeling such a strong attachment to food. So yes.
Yes, I could tell that you're very passionate about this topic, and the reason why I wanted to have you on was that this is applicable to anyone who is into fitness, really, not just bodybuilders and powerlifters. Because I have some bodybuilders, I'm sure, who listen to this podcast because of the guests that I get on. But the most all of my clients are not professional bodybuilders, and yet I know from speaking to them and other people that these issues touch a little bit, a lot of people to an extent, even without developing a full on eating disorder. So I thought that having you on to discuss this would be really thought provoking for everyone. Now, the study that I am going to
Yes.
refer to is for the audience. It's titled Disordered Eating Behaviors Among Bodybuilders and Powerlifters, the Role of Aesthetic Pressure and Rapid Weight Loss. My understanding, Winnie, is that this study is not publicly available yet, is it?
Yes, it's not. It is being published, but it's not up yet in Google Scholar or anything. So that's why it's not fully publicly available, but it is still in the process of being published right now.
And you already kind of answered the first question I was going to ask, which was what made you decide to run this study? It seems like this is a topic that's really close to your heart. Do you have anything to add to
Yes.
what you already said around the reasons for running this particular study?
Yes, because in I didn't notice. Okay, I need to first say that I am not diagnosed with eating disorder, but I do have some symptoms and also like some, characteristic that I am actually showing signs, especially when I was in 2023, where I started competing in 2015 or in 2016. So I competed every year and I make no gain. So I've been technically cutting just for a show, and then I just binge full on like eating nonstop, and I can't even control myself. And it will be the case where I am so full, but I will just go and try to throw up so that I have more space for my tummy to eat more. And I didn't know what was that about. I just know that I just keep doing it until 2022. That's where, sorry, 2019, that's where COVID hit, and then I don't get to compete, and that's where I start to see, oh shit. So being in a proper off season is where I actually gain muscle mass. And then in 2022 I started to try to give like a shot, like a run off, like let's just do a show again, like a mini cut. And it wasn't that bad because I was just doing for fun. And on 2023, I'm like, okay, you know what? I think I gained enough. Let's just go head on head to it. And that was bad. Like the real post show, I was eating nonstop. And it scares me. And I was like, for a moment, I know that I need to change. And I was like telling my partner, Kevin, you did interview him. Yeah. I told him that I need to change, that my relationship with food is no longer just because I always am on tracking my calories and all that. And I always allow myself on Saturday where I just eat nonstop. So I didn't know there is a problem until I see that there is a problem that I need to change. And then I realized that a lot of times it is because I view a very black and white mentality where either I am in or I am out, or maybe like, oh, if I don't eat right now, I will not have this window of eating again. So from 2023 onwards, I started to see these kind of habits, and I'm like, you know what, Winnie, I think it's time to change. And that's where the next following year, which I do my master's in research, will be in this topic to see how, one, I am selfish to learn a little bit more about myself and also the things that I'm interested in. And two, the more that I dig into it and read up about it and realize that it is so applicable to everybody. And it's a shame that there's not a lot of research, particularly on bodybuilders, and most of them are like on endurance athlete, and we already well known knowing that the red ass and low energy, just not really into the aesthetic role and also the rapid weight loss kind of that kind of category. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you for being so honest about your experience. That resonates.
Yeah.
A lot of what you say resonates with me because when I was a teenager, I got a full-blown eating disorder. I got anorexia. So it was never the kind of eating disorder where you can't stop eating. I just wouldn't eat, period. And that there would be no compensation at any point. And then when I
Oh
recovered
no.
from it, I
Okay.
still had some disordered eating thoughts and behaviors in my early 20s. And now I consider myself pretty much on the other side of that. But that is why talking about these topics is so important to me. From a very selfish perspective, I am also
Yeah.
interested in understanding this a bit more and getting this information out to other people because, as you say, there isn't a lot of research, especially when in the sport of bodybuilding, where the aesthetic role and the extreme degree to which one pushes their body, well, the aesthetic aspect is really important, and also pushing yourself to that degree, getting that lean, can
Yep.
precipitate some disordered eating thoughts and behaviors. So I think it's important to talk about this. Now, speaking of this research, then, you identify this gap. Okay, there isn't a lot of research specifically in the bodybuilding and powerlifting sphere. What kind of gap do you want to fill specifically with this particular study, other than adding to this research, which isn't particularly, the breadth of research isn't particularly wide right now?
Well, yeah, particularly just because of the sport. It's just very different kind of sport. Like, a lot of people like to say bodybuilding is not a sport, but regardless of which, in fact, if anything, I think bodybuilding is like a 24/7. People are consistently thinking about, we are either training and then we are talking about food, whereas most of the time, other sports, they don't really care too much per se. I'm not saying they don't care, but at least it's not like an on or off switch. It's not like, oh, I am because bodybuilding is always like when you see most of the off-season bodybuilders, they are like chops, most of them, because they don't really, they're either just locked in or they're not, right? And then on the other hand, powerlifting on the other hand is straight up, they just do extreme things in a short period amount of time. So it's a completely different sport, although they are like similar because they are still, lifting, they're still, doing resistance training per se. But these are the things that usually kind of like overlook. A lot of times, as I said, they only focus on endurance. They do focus on female and male particularly, but they don't really focus on this particular uh, um, population of people that I am myself as invested and interested in. Yes.
That makes perfect sense. So tell us more about the
Yeah.
study, the methods, the participants, any information that you think is important for us to understand what exactly you and your team did.
Okay. So by method, I'm just gonna pull it up for a while. Sorry. Okay. So I'm not too sure how much of a method that you want me to delve into, but it's not like a whole full-on study where I will bring participant in, but it's more like a questionnaire, which that is part of the limitation of these studies. So the it's all about questionnaire. We have some three like four questionnaires with one where someone will have recall of their diet. So one will be eat 26, T, F, Q, or R 18. Is all these are like questionnaire that has already been validated to kind of pre-screen whether this person have eating disorder behavior but not really disordered eating. So it's like not eating disorder but disordered eating behavior. Okay, and then we have rapid weight loss methods as well. So this is very particular for powerlifters to know that what is their method that they use. And BAS is body appreciation skill. So this is very important for bodybuilders because it's just weird how everybody thought that we don't appreciate our bodies, hence we kind of like forcefully. But the research actually shown otherwise. It's like people actually have, especially female bodybuilder, have really high body appreciation. So the logic can go by because I look better right now. I am, I appreciate my body so much that now I double down on eating properly. And then eating properly means I have to restrict what I have to eat and what I want to be because there is a difference between what I value as my body, but I don't value the habits that comes together with it. And there is this discrepancy between do I want to look good or do I want to eat? Right, but in reality that's not black and white. In reality it's like, okay, how do I adopt certain level of values and still maintain that, okay, you know what, I can still eat but I understand that there's a flexible restraint around food rather than either I eat or I don't eat. And then last but not least will be a 1 day recall of how their dietary intake is like. And most of the bodybuilders do care a lot about protein and fibers, which kind of understandable. But when it comes to powerlifter, most of them they just eat. So most of their dietary habit is not that good. But we will still take into consideration of like how they are eating, and that is that. We do get a lot of questionnaire from bodybuilder and powerlifter, but if the problem is that within the community. So for example, like if you are a bodybuilder, I will ask you, hey, can you do a questionnaire for me? And then you'll be like, okay, can you share it to your friends? So that will be another limitation of the paper because it's within their own population in a way. So the population will not be like, it's not broad. It's not like, oh, okay, because usually bodybuilder will flocks around together with some other bodybuilders. Then the questionnaire that you get is usually be around the same people. That's where I would say that that's a limitation of the paper. And most sad part is that it is self-reported. So then sometimes can be biased. Like we are all bodybuilders, we are all athlete in general. Underreporting is actually quite common because there is a stigma to understand that, oh, because I'm an athlete, I will not show you the other side of me, that I'm weak in my opinion. Like I feel weak, so they might underreport certain things. So that would be the limitation of my paper. That's how I get the methods of that. So there is no clinical interview, or it's just questionnaire. And then again, as I say, snowball sampling. So people just share it to someone else share it to someone else. So that's where the limits in representative. So that is the whole methods of getting my informations. And then from there, I would then churn out the data, and then I'll put into two parts. One will be see what is the relationship between all of those questionnaires and also their eating behavior and how they perceive themselves and everything. And then after that, the next one will be regression to see what's the strongest predictor to DEB, which is disordered eating behavior. Does that make sense? Yes. It's a little bit more detail because a lot of times more of the people will be like, Winnie, I don't want to know all this. Just tell me what is it about, because it's a little bit more deep into it. So when I was in presenting, I always ask, okay, how deep do you want this to be?
What you said makes perfect sense, and I think it was actually pretty succinct. One question that came up for me right away, I actually, for
Yeah.
the people who aren't on YouTube watching this, I lifted my hand to say, I want to ask a question, like in school. And it was about the
Yes.
questionnaires. You mentioned that one of them was a disordered eating questionnaire, and I think it would be helpful for the audience to clarify the difference between what is considered an eating disorder and what's considered disordered eating in the research that you've conducted.
Okay, so eating disorder is something that has been really diagnosed by a therapist or someone who who are in the medical field, like a dietitian will tell you that, hey, you have flu-borne eating disorder. Whereas right now, what I'm doing is purely just seeing the symptoms, seeing the criteria of like, okay, you have uncontrolled eating, how you feel about it. There is no diagnosis, so this is just an disorder eating behavior. So you kind of have the symptoms of what a person with eating disorder have, but you do not have disorders. Just for example, COVID, right? So you may have symptoms of what COVID, like you're probably having fever, you probably having some flu. You can kind of tell that, you know what, I might have COVID, but you do not have COVID until you are fully diagnosed that you have COVID. Yeah, that's the difference.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you for explaining. I'm curious about the participants' average demographics. So what was the average sex, the average age, and if you noted that, the average experience in bodybuilding and powerlifting in terms of years?
Okay, so I need to pull up the data. I'm so sorry that I did not prepare for that.
Not a problem at all. I get nerdy about studies sometimes.
No, I should be on top of this, because I was planning a little bit more general. That's why I didn't really put in that numbers out. Okay, but if you do want to know, I would love to share this. Give me a second. Let me just bring it up for a moment.
Not a problem. I'm not going anywhere.
Okay. All right. So let's just pull up the data. Oh God. Okay, so let's just look at the overview. Okay, in terms of bodybuilders, there are like 24 bodybuilders with 22 powerlifters. So among that 24 and 22, you have female that is about a in-season female. Sorry. Yeah, total for female will be 24 bodybuilders and 22 powerlifters, and for male will be 43 bodybuilders and 42 powerlifters. So it's kind of, I'm going to make sure that all of them are kind of similar to each other so that we make a good comparison. So it's like 43 with 42 for male, and then for female is 24 to 22. So it's kind of balanced on each other. What else do you need to know?
I wanted to know about their average age, and if you know about how long they've been competing in their respective sports.
Yes. Okay. So for the female age, the mean will be about 20. For bodybuilder female, will be about 26, plus minus about 1.96. And then for powerlifter for female is about 30, so they are a little bit older. In terms of male, will be 28 plus minus 5, and powerlifter will be 29 plus minus 3. So males are pretty similar to each other, but for females, slightly younger for bodybuilder. Whereas if you're talking about training years, females in bodybuilding is about 6 years plus minus 3 years. And for powerlifters, surprisingly, only 4 years plus minus 3 years. But for male, bodybuilder is about 8 years plus minus 5 years. And for powerlifters, it's only 4 years plus minus 3 years. Yes.
I need to unmute myself before I speak. I was going to say, it's always interesting to understand the average demographics because it can give us more insight into who this might be applicable to. Not to say that if you're not a power lifter or bodybuilder between the age of 26 and 30, this isn't going to be at all applicable to you. But it's still useful to know. And also, I think it's interesting to gain perspective into how long might have they been competing, and because it can give you an insight into how soon do these problems arise, and do people go into the sport without issues and develop them as they
go along,
advance, or is it that they start with maybe some issues already, or at least some factors that could predispose them to developing them, and then the sport is an avenue to precipitate those behaviors? That's what's interesting about understanding the demographics to me.
True, it is, but unfortunately, it is a limitation part of the paper that I can do causation, but I didn't do causal link. There is, and even right now, I can tell you that I wouldn't know exactly what the sports actually this would exhibit whether the DB, or is it just partly because like how many people say that tracking will cause you. No, it doesn't. The thing is that you never know whether because of it, people tend to track calories more because they watch after how they look. So there is no causation, but there's a causal link to. So my research, the prevalence of DB is actually just mainly will be the uncontrolled eating and emotional eating. So that will be sorry, yeah, uncontrolled eating and also emotional eating is the main cause or main causal to DEB. So that is the main highlight of it. Not really the rapid weight loss, or not even the dietary. That doesn't really have much of the outcome for per se. There's no significant link between the sports discipline and also the body appreciation as well. So mainly it's just a lot of the cognitive restraint, uncontrolled eating, and emotional eating. So it's a lot emotional part of it and the brain part of it rather than what the sports is or maybe what they are doing with it. Yes.
That's interesting to me because I don't know that the research has been able to answer the question, does bodybuilding or powerlifting for that matter cause
Yep.
an eating disorder? My view, based on the research I'm aware of, and I don't know nearly enough as you, obviously, because it's not my job, but from what I
Yep.
am aware of, my personal view is that, and also based on my own experience, I suspect that the sports themselves do not cause eating disorder behaviors, just like tracking calories per se doesn't cause an eating disorder. I think
Yep.
there are predisposing factors, and in eating
Yes.
disorder, discussing clinical eating disorders,
Yep.
clinicians discuss precipitating factors as well as predisposing factors. And so my view is I had predisposing factors to developing an
Yep.
eating disorder. And I developed it long before I even knew what bodybuilding was. At that point, I wasn't even lifting weights, nothing like
Yep.
that. Then I had the leftover disordered behaviors from the eating disorder, even when I was physically recovered from the eating disorder itself. And one would have said, okay, you no longer have anorexia because you are physically recovered and you no longer have the urge to essentially starve yourself. I still had disordered eating, and that's when I went into bodybuilding. And so I already had these predisposing factors.
Yes, correct.
I'd already had the eating disorder itself.
Yep.
But then, my suspicion is, and also the way that my personality works, I am extremely organized, I extremely structured and ambitious and hardworking and driven. When I'm passionate about something, I will do it to the nth degree. And one of the reasons I developed anorexia was that I channeled all of this
Yes.
into the desire to lose weight, and I took it to an extreme. I've always been an overachiever, and I managed to overachieve lose weight loss essentially.
Yes.
And I suspect, okay, bodybuilders share a lot of these traits with me.
Yep.
It seems to be the nature of the person that goes into the sports, or at least not everyone, but many bodybuilders have these traits. So that makes me wonder, is in the chicken or egg situation? My personal opinion is, I don't think that bodybuilding causes an eating disorder, but the
just so
people who are
happen,
attracted to it
to the
can.
sport is yeah.
I don't know
Because
how
right
you
now
feel about it.
I agree. I completely agree because right now even my paper, like the regression analysis predictor, is like the strongest predictor is cognitive restraint. So it is kind of, think about it perspective. Like if you were to think about it, I am cognitively thinking about doing something that I want, right? And then I get into the sport. Just so happen, I'm like, okay, this sport kind of reward me from doing this. So I do believe that sport doesn't cause it, but it does play a role because one, it does normalize it in a way. Like imagine post show and then they start posting how they binge, how they 10,000 calorie challenge, it becomes norm. So no one's going to say something, hey, this is not right, you know? So then I would say one is that you predisposed to it and then you got into the sport, and then the people around that has been doing this, you know, weird stuff like cutting water, doing this, doing that. And it becomes so normalized that everybody don't seem to see a problem to try to solve. Like as I told you, in 2023, if it wasn't for me telling Kevin that I want to change, I don't think I will change, because I have been with Kevin for 10 years and he always told me that, hey, you shouldn't eat like that. And I'll be like, hey, who are you to tell me no? Because on Sunday to Friday, I have been eating good. I have been tracking. I've been hitting my protein. What is that one Saturday? You know, I would just brush him off until when I see it as a problem, I wanted to change it. That's where I pursued to improve my relationship with food, because I want to change it. So that's also why the big practical takeaway is always ask your client, like, do your client wants to change? If your client don't see it as a problem, there is no problem to solve. Although you see it as a problem.
Absolutely, that resonates with me so strongly, because I've had this on my mind for a while in the context of
Yep.
coaching. If it's not a problem to the client, it's not a problem for me, because I
Yes.
personally am not going to impose my views on a client. I can only guide them, present them
Yeah,
with
I
pros and
agree.
cons, and help them make an informed decision. But then it's their body, it's their health. They need to
Yep.
have the desire to make a change, if and that's when to me it's a problem if the client says it's a problem. So
Yes.
I completely agree with what you're saying there. Personal bias 2000%.
Yes, agree completely. Yes.
So, talking about the conclusions and the analysis that you've run, you've mentioned that you were going, after collecting the data, you explored the relationship between the questionnaires, self-perceptions, and eating behaviors. You already
Yep.
mentioned one of the conclusions, which seems like one
Yep.
of the strongest predictor of disordered eating is cognitive restraint. And if I'm
Yep.
not wrong, you also mentioned that uncontrolled and emotional eating seems to be the main
Yes.
causal factor of you. If I'm not wrong, you mentioned BED, so I took it to mean binge eating disorder.
DB means disorder eating behavior. Can be
Oh,
binge, can be
DB.
bulimic.
Okay,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I got the basically. I was a little bit confused because I thought that you were exploring disordered eating instead of eating disorders. So what I got wrong was the acronym. I got the
Yes.
acronym
So
wrong. So
yes, correct. No
DEB.
worries. Yes, DEB,
Cool.
correct.
So you've mentioned already these two conclusions. Was there anything else that emerged from your analysis?
Um, no, it's just that it just shocked me to see how the common this problem is. And if you were to look at it, it was like female bodybuilders like 45.8% is having DB risk, and then female powerlifter is 40.9, male bodybuilder is 39.5, and male powerlifter is 21. So if you were to look at it in an overall sample, like 35% of them is actually having a high risk of DEB. And it's more common than a lot of people think, because a lot of people just brush it off and they don't really think about, as I say, if it's not a problem, you won't probably try to solve it. But when you start to get them to have questionnaire and you look at it like, oh, it's actually beyond what I expected it to be. I didn't expect it to be that high. It's pretty high. Although you may be like, oh, it's not 50%, but think about it. Having eating, disorder eating patterns and stuff like that is not it may not be serious right now until you actually don't solve it. That may actually cause worse. So I do have clients that have disorder eating patterns or behavior. I will always try my best to help them, but I will tell them that, hey, if this goes on and it become more and more serious, I will refer you to the actual therapist, that because it's beyond my scope of practice or beyond my expertise. I may know a little bit, but I don't know how to solve problem that is diagnosed. Yeah.
Absolutely. I am also not qualified to help people with diagnosable eating disorders. I can only point this out if I believe that it's happening, and then refer out if the client agrees that they want to get help. So I
Yep.
completely understand your perspective. And I agree. I think that overall, a 35% um, outcome in terms of people with an increased risk of disordered eating is pretty high. I mean, we're talking about 1/3 of your subjects at the end of the day, which
Yes.
is which is pretty intense considering that overall eating disorders or disordered eating is likely more common than eating disorders, but eating disorders
Yes.
aren't that common to begin with, so that
Yep.
out of a sample, a third of it will be at an increased risk of disordered eating behaviors is quite significant in my view.
Yes. Me too. I think so too.
And so once you've come to these conclusions, what are, in your view, the practical takeaways, not just for coaches, although we can cover that for sure, I have some coaches listening, but also for clients and athletes, just the average person who might be dealing with this?
I would say that it's very important to talk to someone. Okay, but you can try to get whether to see whether you get diagnosed with it, or at least you can kind of minimize the risk, or like early detection is definitely better than finding ways to recover from it. If you realize that you have this kind of behavior, talk to somebody, get a professional help if you need to. But if you feel like, okay, maybe I wasn't that serious, maybe working with a coach, especially coaches with this kind of experience, would be great. That's where I pride myself in what I do, because I truly care. I hate it when coaches come to go to people and be like, oh, I can help you lose 10 kg, I can help you this transformation that, and I'm like, if this person doesn't even know how to eat properly, why we're talking about deficit? Well, let's just talk about what is she trying to eat, why is she eating this way, before we go on to manipulate what she's trying to do or what she's eating. And most of them are always have this dichotomy of like dirty or clean food. I'm pretty sure you heard of that, which teach them how to actually eat, teach them what is nutrition literacy is really low, especially in Malaysia. Malaysians doesn't really know. They don't. I want to say all of them, but most of my clients who comes in, because I deal with general population, they don't truly understand calories. They don't truly understand macros. They just know that, okay, if I want to lose weight, I'm just gonna eat clean. What is clean? When I ask them, they'll be like, oh, salmon, nuts, those are clean. I'm like, yeah. Then what is dirty? Burger. I'm like, what if the burger is made out of like chicken breast? What if the burger has been changed into like, okay, instead of like full blown sauces with bacon, now I change it to like chicken breast with some egg whites and add up with some sauces. Is that dirty or is it clean? They can't answer because they feel like, oh my god, this is so mind boggling. What is this? What is this curry? And sometimes I have to understand that eating clean doesn't mean you're gonna lose weight, because all of them like yummy food after all. Or they were like, oh, skewer is protein. I'm like, nah, debatable. You know what I mean? Because especially in Malaysia, we our skewer, we call it satay. So they will have like meat together with like peanut sauce, and they call it protein. I'm like, you sure that's protein? Even clients will come to you and say eggs is a protein. No, eggs is not a protein. Egg is a fat source with protein. And then they don't quite understand. They're like, what do you mean? So if you really break it down into calories and you realize that yes, one egg is about 6 grams of protein, for example, but 5 grams of it is from fat. They're like, yeah, it's still high in protein. But let's just do the math. If you were to do 6 times 4 is 24, and 5 times 9 is 45, which means most of it, a bigger chunk, comes from fat. And they, for a moment, they just got shocked, like, eggs is not protein? I'm like, yes, eggs is not protein. Eggs is a fat source with protein.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you bring up education, because one topic I wanted to touch on was, for the audience, I found out about your work because you gave a presentation at a natural bodybuilding summit just recently. I wanted to attend, but
Yes.
unfortunately I wasn't able to. I'm hoping to do it if they do it next year. In any event, you kindly sent me your presentation slides, and something that you wrote on there was what you call the coach's playbook. So I wanted to hear a little
Oh,
bit
yeah.
about what that is, and the first part of the coach's playbook is education. So that's where my
Yes.
thinking came from, essentially. But first, present a little bit about what it is exactly.
Okay, so the coach's playbook is really not like a hard rule per se. It's just that I think of it and I'm like, okay, this is actually pretty applicable to a lot of people. And I was like putting it into 4 categories. So there was educate, monitor, transition, and then refer. So the educate part, which is what I'm talking about, like basic nutritional information, like teaching clients how to, what is calories, what is macros, what is micros, where does fiber lies. There are clients who ask me, okay, they don't understand that vegetables and fruits are carbs, and I'm like, but they are fiber. I'm like, fibers are carbs, right? And it's like, oh, how could it be? I'm like, so then I ask them, is vegetable protein? And he's like, no. Is vegetable fat? No. Then it has to be carbs. Yeah, those are the basic nutrition. I would say educate your client, tell them about what is basic nutritional literacy and information. Then once they understand this concept, they will not have this dichotomy of like dirty food, clean food, bad food. Because to me, there is no bad food. Of course, there are certain things that are like categorically not great, like trans fat or like too much saturated fat. But there is no such thing as like a bad food. There is a bad diet. So if you're consistently eating all this junk food that is high in trans fat, high in saturated fats, and all that, that is not going to be good for your health, then yeah, your diet needs to be fixed. But there is no one food going to break all. It just doesn't mean that just because you eat one salad doesn't make you healthy. That's the same way if you were to eat a burger doesn't make you a bad person. Problem with a lot of people that have disorder eating behavior is that they put themselves very closely to, if I eat bad, I'm a bad person. But it is not the same way, right? You can make a bad decision. That doesn't make you a bad person. That is something that people need to like learn how to uh, uh, disassociate themselves with that. And then next is the concept of diffusion. Oh, this is a big topic that I love to talk about. So if I were to tell people, okay, when I ask someone, okay, what do you think of when you think about birthday? They say birthday cake. Then what do you think about when you go to cinema? Oh, popcorn. And then whenever I'm pretty sure you have this client will be like, oh, I have to go out and drink because I need to social. Social equals food, party, drinks, which sometimes doesn't make sense. It's like me trying to tell you every time you go to the mall, you must buy a handbag. You kind of be like, is that insane? But technically speaking, right now you are doing that. You're doing happy, sad, angry, any feelings you probably just related to food, right? You're stressed. I have a stress. I want to just eat my feelings away. Or maybe I'm happy. Oh my God, it's a celebration. Let's just have cakes. Let's just have pizza. So these are the things that you need to learn how to diffuse yourself. That is what the concept of diffusion is supposed to be, is to diffuse yourself to understand that you can, i.e., if I were to go out with you, what is the purpose of me going out with you? Good example. If I were to go out, a lot of people like to do this. I have to drink because I'm going out with my friends. And I'm going to ask you, why do you want to go out with your friends? Oh, my friends is just having a bad day. We just want to have a chat. Then do you have to drink? You don't have to drink because you can just have a chat without a drink. The next question is more like, do you want to drink? You can choose to drink if you want to drink. It's not okay to say that I don't want to drink, but because I associate myself and diffuse myself into seeing that I see my friends means I have to drink. So once you learn how to separate that two concepts, that's where you will like, okay, if I want the food, I can have the food. I don't have to have the food just because it's just right there. Right? This is a lot of times people, when I say these kind of things, a lot of people would just, the mind just boggles like, oh yeah, I don't have to eat if I don't want to eat. Just because I'm with my friends in the restaurant, I can eat my own food. This, I think part of the bodybuilders, especially they're on prep, they did it very well. They know how to bring their food, they prep their food, but they don't understand that even off season, you can always ask this question: do you actually want to eat? Even then, for example, there's another one is a lot of times, especially in Asia, we like to finish and clean our plate. I always ask my client, do you actually enjoy the food? If you don't have to clean the plate. Whatever you didn't finish, it won't go to the African kid out there where you claim that, oh, I don't want to waste food. The best way of not wasting food is not to over order. That's it. If I don't over order, I don't waste food. I don't have to force myself to finish the plate just because it's there. right? Which link me to the second part of it is the feeling wheels. Have you heard of feeling wheels? Have you seen the feeling wheels?
Yes, I've seen it before.
Okay.
I use it a
I'll,
lot.
Oh yes, okay. This is a very good one. A lot of people have this thought like when I'm sad, I'm eating. When I'm happy, I'm eating. Sometimes you have to just teach your client to understand that you need to dig deeper. What it means is that when you are sad, because food is a very comforting thing, and people like something that is quick. That's why people go into alcoholism, they go into smoking, drugs, things like that, because it's an instant relief or instant stress, right? Stress relief. With that being said, it didn't really solve the problem. But whenever if you really delve into actual like the feeling, you need to ask yourself, I'm happy. Why are you happy? Oh, okay, example. Let's just do an example. I think example is good. Everybody was like, oh, I'm sad. And I'm sad and I want to eat. Why do you want to eat? Oh, I'm sad because my partner just broke up with me. Then the next question is like, so you're lonely, right? When you're sad, you're lonely. You're not because you wanted to eat or not because you're hungry. That's why you're sad. If you're saying, okay, I'm sad because I'm lonely, guess what? The better solution is to call someone. It can be a friend, can be your mom, can be anybody that you care about, instead of just stuffing your face with ice cream. Because after you eat ice cream, you feel guilty and it didn't solve the problem that you feel lonely. And the cycles just keep repeating and repeating. So if you were to dig deeper and redirect your emotion away from just food, human brains are just so funny. We always like to find connections and we want to find problem solution. Example, when you go to the room, you see a dark room, automatically you always look for the switch. Like, where's the light of switch? Once you know where the switch is, the next thing you do, I'm pretty sure when you come into the door, you don't even think about where it is. You just come in, snap the switch. That's what the brain does. So you want to make sure that whenever you feel something, dig deeper instead of, I feel this, I'm going to go eat. I feel that, I just want to make sure there's food. No, you want to redirect your emotion away from food. So my job as a coach, or any coaches out there that's listening, your job, if you can, try your best to make sure that your clients have this big lag time that I always say. So from thoughts or emotions to action, there is this big lag time so that they can actually learn to understand that, do you actually want to eat? Or do you just want to use food as a source of comforting or a band-aid for the problem that you're having? The more lag time there is, the more thinking process will take in. And the more thinking process takes in, decision becomes a little bit more wiser rather than just, I feel like I want to do this. Yeah.
Very interesting. So that all falls under part one, the educate part of the coach's playbook, which comprises basic nutrition information, avoiding the dichotomy that there are bad foods and good foods, the concept of diffusion and the feelings wheel. And the second part of this coach's playbook is titled Monitor.
Yes.
So I'm curious about what it comprises.
Okay, it comprised with the first one is no guilt approach. This is a big one. I realized that when it comes to coaching in the coaching world, a lot of coaches like to shame their client. It does work somehow, sometimes, but most of the time it doesn't. In fact, if anything, it actually deters your client from telling you the truth because they feel like, oh, I'm not. It's like I told you, eating bad food means I'm a bad person. I have let my coaches down. But the guilt approach doesn't actually apply because you want more information from your client. If your clients are hiding information from you, you don't know what's the right move to do, what is the next decision to make, right? In fact, if you were to be empathetic and be like, okay, let's just look at your food. Why do you eat certain way? Is it because of your value system is different? Or is it because your goal has changed? Things like that, when you talk it out, it makes more sense than just saying that, oh my God, you've been shitty. What is wrong with you breaking the plan? Just get back to on track. Being on track, just that word, doesn't make you a coach. It just make you a ChatGPT. Right? I don't need you if you were to tell me to just get back on track. And there are coaches out there that don't really have conversations. I think a good coach should be having conversations and understand that the best coach is not about transformation. The best coach is managing expectations. Understand where this client is at, what is the problem that the client is feeling, why is she doing certain things that doesn't make sense, right? It may not make sense to both of us, me and the coach, me and the client, but at that point in time, she probably think it makes sense. and ask them, like, why do you think it makes sense to do this? Maybe at now, in the hindsight, when you look back, like, yeah, it doesn't make sense. But at that point, there must be reasons as to why they do, or in general, there is always a why. What time you sleep, why is the sun coming up from this hour? There is why for everything. There must be a why as to why they act and behave a certain way. Once you know the why, you can kind of know, okay, what is the problem that I'm trying to solve? So with that being said, the second point of monitoring is N equals 1, which means your client is the one sample that you are dealing with. You may be, for example, like if client A and B has eating disorder, but the way that you handle each client must be different, right? Because they feel differently, they have different case. I may know certain things, but I don't know whether it works. Example, if client A tells me that, okay, I have been uncontrolled when I eat something like cereal and I love it and I cannot control and I cannot stop, I can't just say, okay, just don't buy cereal and don't leave it at home. Maybe this works, but you need to first try and see. You don't want them to avoid from buying it for cereal for the rest of their life. The goal is not to get rid of cereal. The goal is to make sure that the cereal is around and she knows when to control, when to stop, whether she wants or not, right? So then different methods has different. Maybe the first phase of it would be like, okay, maybe not buying it for now would be helpful. Once you be able to control it, I'll be like, okay, the next time when you go to grocery store, ask yourself if you really want it. If you want it, okay, can we try to put it a little bit further away from just the cabinet? Can it be a little bit higher shelf so that when you truly want it, you'll make that effort to go and get it, right? There's so many different methods, but the main highlights is that your client is that N equals 1. This is the only sample. Sometimes when a lot of people say that, oh, the research says this, the research says that. Yeah. So you are not the sample in the you are not a participant in the paper. It may be applicable, all the principles can be applied, but it may not apply to you. Like creatine, that everybody says is good. What if you are the unlucky one and you're non-responder, right? So then you need to start thinking, okay, what is the harm of using creatine? Even if I am not non-responder, what's the harm? Is a positive to neutral, then I'll take it. But if it's like a neutral to cons, then maybe I shouldn't. Even if it's good, it doesn't apply to me. Maybe I don't want to use it, right? There are a lot of times decision making skills is beyond just research. I think research is helpful. Don't get me wrong. I think it helps to be making informed choices. It helps us to grow forward, to know more informations. But again, it doesn't apply to you. It applies to the participants. But you are not the participant. Understand that. And then, help a client with explore each variables, which is N equals 1. Try this method, see whether it works. I always tell my client, if you are lazy, I can't help you. If you say that, oh, I can't do it because I'm lazy, I can't help you. But if you say that I tried this and this doesn't work, 1, 2, 3, why? And then we can figure it out. Okay, for example, like my client just said that, oh, I'm trying to cook my food, but my food will spoil if I were to be out the whole day. Okay, then we can think about, okay, maybe you can make your food a little bit drier. Maybe you can have a little bit like protein bars as a grab and go. Things can change. But if you were to tell me I can't adhere to the diet because I am lazy, I can't help laziness. But if every variables have you tried and this doesn't work, that doesn't work, at least we can eliminate certain things. Then one is to help me to get to know you better as a client. And 2, is to see that you are getting to know yourself better. A lot of times people think that, oh, I'm just doing it for my coach. No, you're doing it for both your coach to collect data. You are collecting for your data yourself as well. You are a sample of 1. Yes, that is the monitor part.
Very interesting. And then part number 3 is the transition aspect, which I'm curious about as well.
Okay, transition will be most of the time, a lot of coaches just get people to compete. And they're like, okay, because it's a good motivation, especially in bodybuilding as well as powerlifting, right? So it makes you feel like a fulfillment that you can, oh, I have a goal now. but they don't tell them that what is required of a pre-competition, what is required a post-competition, and what happened after that. So me and Kevin is not a big fan of putting clients on stage. A lot of people thought that we are gatekeeping the spot, but they don't understand that, dude, once I cannot explain the color blue to a blind person. It's the same way I cannot explain to you the extreme hunger, the food focus. I can't explain that to you until you get a hang of it. But by getting hang of it, for me, it's the same as habits is the same as strength training. It needs to be a progressive overload. So what I mean by that, so for example, if you are like 70 kg and you want to drop it down to 40 kg to go on stage, that big drop, you have not learned and adapt the habit as a 40 kg person. How does that work for you? And then when you rebound, you might rebound it even worse. So instead of like, oh, let's just use competition as a motivation, even if you can, I'll probably put in like a 2-year project. It wouldn't be, I want to cut so I compete. No, you can cut without competing, because it's a complete different thing. So as a coach, you need to inform them what is required of the competition. Like, you need to have certain habits in place. That's why a lot of times the in-season bodybuilder and the off-season bodybuilder acts completely differently. And then they start having, body image issue or like body dysmorphia, because what they look during in-season and what they behave in off-season, completely two different person. It's like two identity. It's like one person who is Bill Gates trying to earn money, and then the other person is like a bankruptcy that they just keep spending money. You can't do that in the two opposite way. So when I always like you use this as an analogy. If you want to be that person, you have to adopt that person's lifestyle as well. The reason why Bill Gates is so rich is probably because he is so busy, earning money. He doesn't even have time to spend money. But a lot of people wants to be Bill Gates, not knowing that the baggage to be Bill Gates is probably no time to spend. But people want to spend the money, right? So that is where pre-competition, I will probably need to let them know, like, okay, this is what you require, check the boxes before we go on to the competition. Because the post-competition, regardless of whether powerlifting or bodybuilding, it has big significant impact into this. Body recovers really fast. Like, for example, like you're on extreme leanness, all you needed to do, just eat on a surplus. Slowly your hunger and all that will be coming back. Your body fat will be back to normal baseline. You're going to be healthy. But when it comes to this is not easy. When you planted the seed, that idea that, okay, I look this good, I need to hold on to it. And how do I hold on to it? But at the same time, I'm gushing down with this extreme hunger. I have this post-show blues. There's so many things going on. And if you have not been, because right now, if you really put in, let's just try to put in the perspective. Like me, during off season, I do exactly what I do in season. I'm just eating lesser. I eat the same food, more or less the same food. I'm just eating lesser. So the feeling of hunger and the energy is kind of acceptable, because I get used to this kind of thing. And then when I just have to accept that, I'll be a little bit more hungry, a little bit more discomfort, but it doesn't change everything that I do. I wouldn't go on a full-on eating without control, doesn't care about my calories, doesn't care about the composition of the food. So then post-competition, that's why you see a lot of times, even people who don't compete, after a cut, you realize that they rebound back, because they don't understand that, hey, you need to live and accept the value or identity of this person, of a new person that you are actually in a new body weight. So yeah, of course, use different metrics. Like off season, you probably wouldn't be like looking yourself in the mirror. You got to tell your client, like, okay, let's just shift the focus. We shift to, is your perception of food better? Are you getting stronger? Are you feeling more satiated with your food? Those things are more important, rather than focusing, I just want to look lean, I just want to look good, because building muscles takes a long time, and being in a really lean body is just not helpful in that process. So that's something that transitioning is, let your client know, aware, let them make that aware decision. Is like, okay, I want to cut, what do I have to expect after and before? That's it, for the transition. And of course, the last
So
part would be referring. Yes.
I was just going to say that transition sounds to me like it applies to it has two different meanings based on the framework that you've presented, where transition is about transitioning from phase to phase instead of
Yes.
trying to cling to the same phase for a long time. For example, the contest preparation phase is when you get very, very lean. That is not a state that you want to maintain long term. There
Yep.
needs to be a conversation between coach and client around what happens afterwards and the
Yep.
importance of gaining body fat back. But also, it sounds like transition means transitioning your identity. So if somebody is more of a lifestyle client, so they're not competing in bodybuilding, they're not competitive bodybuilders, for them, losing body fat requires maintenance of that body fat. We're not talking about
Correct.
contest prep where we don't maintain that fat loss long
Yep.
term. So for them, the transition is about understanding that if they want to maintain that body fat, they also need to embrace the
The
identity of
habit.
somebody
Yes.
who maintains that body fat loss. Because if they don't, if
Correct.
they maintain the identity they had at the start, then they're going to regain the body fat, because identity is
Exactly.
attached. Well, habits are attached to identity. So if you identify as somebody with fitness promoting habits, then you're going to be successful in maintaining the results you achieve.
Yes, I completely agree. Because I can use it in an example because I have a client that is a little bit slightly overweight. So, for example, like she's at 100 kg, for example. So, 100 kg probably requires you to, I would say the maintenance probably about 3,000 calories to maintain the weight, for example, for a person who's not very active, right? All you need to do for you to be on a calorie deficit, maybe you're eating like 2005, 2004, for example, to just do a calorie deficit for them to just lose like 10 kg. Easy, right? By the time they're like in 80 kg, their maintenance is no longer 3,000. Their maintenance probably go back down to 2,005. In order for them to be on a deficit now, it probably be like 2,000. So from the 3,000 in their mind, they are always thinking about, oh my God, it's like a big 1,000 calorie deficit. Versus if I were to think about it, 2,005 in order for them to lose the weight, and then I just maintain there for a moment, I'll probably be like, okay, instead of 3,000, now I'm eating 2,008 to maintain my calories, right? I maintain my weight, right? And then from there, once I get used to 2,008, now from there, I do a calorie deficit again, 2,002, for example. And then after that, once I get to that body weight zone, in order for me to maintain my weight, probably around 2006, 2005. That's where these small things, it doesn't make like a big jump from eating 3,000 to either 1,005. You know what I mean? So they keep doing these jumping back and forth. That's why they never get to maintain their weight, because they don't understand that there is a transitioning of like habitual and also how they perceive food. And then as they get smaller, their smaller body requires not that much compared to when their body were a little bit bigger. So yeah, that is something that I think it will apply to all the not just competitors. It applies to general population, like everybody trying to lose weight, but they don't understand why can't I maintain the weight? Because in their head, in order for them to maintain the weight is to be on a deficit. No, it's not on a deficit, because their thinking is like, I either deficit or I'm on 3,000. Like, why not just stay in like 2008 zone? You don't have to always eat 2004, and then slowly we scale the difficulties down, and then you kind of first palatable, the food changes from eating 2,000, 3,000, you're eating junk food, to actually now eating a little bit proper and you're fuller right now, right? Changes in food, changes in volume, changes in calories, all those things play in the big part rather than just calorie deficit and how much. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that dichotomy between having the behaviors of somebody who eats 3,000 calories, or thinking, well, if I want to achieve and maintain fat loss, I need to always act like I'm in a deficit. And it's important. That's why I'm sure that's why the first component of this playbook is education, because
Yes.
people need to be told. If you don't know, you don't know. I never think any less of somebody for not knowing something, because you need education, and that's what coaches are here for. So
Yep.
thank you for explaining a bit more about that. Now, the final part that you were going to get to is referral in this coach's
Yes.
playbook.
Okay. I would say that once you're in this coaching line for long, you probably should build a very reliable network. What I mean by reliable network is like, I know somebody that is like can be a physio, can be a therapist, can be even a different coach. Okay, this is like a big one. So a lot of times when even until now, as a coach, I've been coaching for so long. When client leaves, I still feel like, I'm not doing right by my clients. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just not. We are not clicking. So you need to learn to accept that and be like, okay, maybe not the right time for her to change because she don't see it as a problem, or two, maybe she is accepting, but she's not accepting the way that I tell her, or maybe like we are just not clicking. So maybe referring her to another coach would be better. It's not you, it's not her. It could just be a mismatch. Does that make sense? Or maybe not the right time, not the right person. So understand your scope of practice as well. As I say, like if you have a little bit more full on disorder, eating disorder, I will not touch you. I'll probably be like, hey, I don't know much. I know some, but I definitely cannot solve that problem because I am not qualified to solve that problem. So when you refer it out, you get to understand. You can learn from your peers. Like I have physios as my my network. Sometimes when my client have the same problem, the other client have the same problem, I can like, okay, based on this, let's try this. But if it's not better, you actually have to go to a physio. But you learn a little bit here and too, because the most problem that you probably see is like impingement of the shoulder, internal lack of internal rotation of the hips. You kind of know because that's the most common problem. But of course, you cannot solve their problem if they are getting serious. It's like, okay, let's just refer you out. I have no expertise in this. I can give you an advice, but I don't think you should take all my advice as though like it is a god of Bible Bible's words. Yeah.
Okay, for some reason my unmuting button was not working, so now it's working again. So I unmuted myself. I was just going to say,
Yeah.
for the non-coaches out there, the people who are listening who might be looking for a coach, this is basically this playbook is how to find a competent coach, in my view, because what you've described to me, Winnie, are basically all coaches' green flags, especially if
Yes.
somebody refers out. I believe in the industry there can be some stigma sometimes around admitting that you don't have expertise in
Yeah.
a certain topic just because it's related to fitness. I am very ready to admit when I don't know enough about something. Just because it's about fitness and health does not make me qualified
Yeah.
to deal with it. And as you do, I have a whole network of specialists to refer people to. So I think that for anybody listening who's looking for a coach, it's important to have some critical thinking around the decision. And in my view, if somebody is behaving in the way that you described in this coach's playbook, Winnie, they're likely at least a
Yes.
competent coach. As you say, then
Yes.
there's a psychological component. Maybe
Yep.
you gel better with a different coach from a personality perspective, and that's fine. But I think overall, these are the kind of features that I would be looking for in a coach for myself, and I think it's very helpful for other people as well to think about it that way.
Yeah. I completely agree because I always tell my client this. I if I don't know, I will not bullshit you and pretend like I know and give you a wrong answer or like a ChatGPT answer or a Google answer. I would I would do my own research because you paid me not because I'm an encyclopedia. You paid me because I do the job to go and find out the answer together with you, to explore with you, right? But at the same time, if I don't know something that I think is something that is beyond what I'm supposed to be, my job as a coach is to put my clients interest beyond anybody else, because if I were to care about my client, I have to make sure that I would not put them in harm's way. I should not be trying to diagnose them when I don't know anything about it, right? These are the things that, yeah, I would say a green flag that you're looking for in coaches. Because if they would tell you that I know everything, it's a lie. Even ChatGPT can be wrong. How can you not be wrong? If I'm readily to admit that sometimes I could giving a I I did kind of correct myself when I was like telling sometimes when information is out there so much, right? Sometimes I get it wrong. And then I will just go up to my client and be like, hey, you remember that day we were having this conversation? I'm readily, I mean, that, oh, I was wrong. After I read it about it. And I think a lot of clients actually appreciate that more than you pretend like you can't be wrong. Because once they find out, and they'll be like, oh, I don't think Winnie's right. And she didn't come and correct it. So clearly she didn't know that much. Versus if you were to come in clean after you read it up, it's like, oh, hey, I think this was wrong. What I said was wrong. It just shows you that you are one, actually evidence based, and respect not just your own personal view, but it's also like both sides of the coin, and just consider more than just broader perspective than just what you know, right? And two, willing to correct your own personal view. There shouldn't be biases, because at the end of the day, as I said, the client's interest must come first. If you care about your client, you should put that in like the priorities, not yourself. It's never about you if you're a coach. If you always think about yourself, maybe you're not a great coach. You want to be an athlete yourself, you can, but you should, if you want to be a coach, it's always the athlete that comes first, or the client that comes first. Yeah.
Thank you for that perspective, Winnie. Now, to wrap up the podcast, I'm wondering where people can find you so that I can put all those links in the show notes for anybody who might want to follow your work or inquire about coaching.
Yep. You can find me on Instagram, Winnie_WMBF Pro.
Brilliant, easy, just one place for everything. Fantastic. Before we conclude the podcast, I'm wondering if there's anything that you want to add to put a bow on the conversation.
For you, all these listeners out there, if you feel like you want someone to talk to about your eating behavior, or you feel like something is off, make sure you talk to someone. Don't keep it to yourself. Again, you're not a bad person just because you ate a bad food. Okay, even if your diet is bad, you're not a bad person. Disassociate yourself with that. There is no feeling involved. Food is just food. Yes, that's all.
Beautiful. Winnie, this was such a thought-provoking conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
And dear listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in, as always. And with that, I will talk to you next time.